Maria Montessori was the first woman physician to become an educator teaching mentally retarded children in Rome. She worked with the children who were abandoned by their mothers and fathers starting at the age of 3. When the children were first left with her, they were scared, timid, and so shy that they did not speak. They had no idea how to read and write or do anything by themselves. With the methods of Montessori, the children were reading, writing, and independently dressing themselves and interacting with their peers and adults by the age of 4 or 5. Montessori changed her ideas about the education of young children in that she believed that they were able to learn not by the traditional way when the teacher gives the students the knowledge, but more so by the children teaching themselves in an environment that is individually designed based on their interest. She believed this because she would watch the children choose the materials and play with them for long periods of time, enabling them to teach themselves an important skill or item of knowledge. Dr. Montessori also observed that for a child to develop the skill of concentrating for a long time, they must be interested in the material they are working with. She understood that an educator can't force a child to think, but rather provide the materials to engage the child's interest and increase their concentration. Montessori's method has many benefactors. Her method allows children to increase their creativity. Children work on the activity for the job of the work rather than the end result. This allows them to focus more on the process rather than result, which is a natural path to creativity. Another benefit is it teaches them self-discipline. All objects and activities have precise locations on the shelves of a Montessori classroom. When children are finished with an activity, they place items back into their appropriate places. This sense of order helps facilitate the learning process, teaches self-discipline, and caters to a young child's innate need for an orderly environment. When the children work and play in an area that is neat and predictable, they can unleash their creativity and focus fully on the learning process. Another benefit is students in the Montessori program are allowed to explore activities and concepts at their own pace. This naturally encourages the children to try more challenging areas, which accelerates their learning experience. Learning occurs at a comfortable pace for each student rather than inflicting the same rate on every student in a classroom. However, Montessori's method has some limitations as well. One of probably the biggest limitation is the lack of social skills a child develops in a Montessori classroom. Because they work individually, they may not transition well to a more traditional and less individualized program. Another disadvantage of this method is about the focus. The focus is on developing skills in the preferred learning area for the student rather than all the subjects. Another factor that some may find is that the program is not necessarily led by a teacher, but rather the student is teaching himself with the teacher just as a guide. This can be difficult for students who need constant assistance from the teacher. While watching the children using the sensory materials, she observed some interesting things. She observed that for a child to develop the skill of concentrating for a long time, he or she must be interested in that material that they are working with. She realized that the materials that serve this purpose are those that lend themselves to activity and repetition. Montessori also observed that when a child becomes interested in the object, the teacher must not interrupt, because if the child is interrupted, they might lose their concentration and not want to continue with the activity. Another thing Montessori saw was that the material that the children were playing with served to educate the eye to distinguish the difference in dimension. She realized that the child trains himself to observe and that he can be led to comparisons between objects to form judgments and to decide. And it's because of this exercise of attention and intelligence that development occurs. The Montessori approach to reading is entirely phonics-based. It teaches children to read and write by focusing first on the shapes and sounds of letters and then on combinations of letters and their corresponding chains of sounds. By providing children with materials that interest them on a sensorial level and building step by step from the base to their high levels, the Montessori approach helps children not only to learn to read and write, but also to enjoy it. Being a nanny, I have seen some examples of sensory learning. This has occurred when I allowed the children to create shapes using Play-Doh and using spaghetti noodles to create letters. I have also seen examples of sensory learning when I had the children paint with water paints. These are just a few examples of sensory learning, and I look forward to seeing more as I start my observations in classrooms.